当我们有些 disagreement 的时候，通常都会带一些情绪。今天让我们跟心理医师学习安全的说 I don't agree。Hello， 欢迎来到 Executive Plus 主管与沟通力的 Podcast。I'm Sherry, an educator, certified coach, and style enthusiast. 我相信专业有效的沟通是语言跟逻辑的完美结合。
And I'm Nick, a startup consultant, corporate trainer, and late-night gaming junkie. I believe great communication requires the right mindset and solid frameworks.
我们希望带给大家职场英语的技能、跨文化沟通技巧与其他能帮助您成为出色领导者的工具。
Join us each week as we share our experience, research, and methodologies to take your communication and language skills from good to great. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Executive Plus podcast. It's the beginning of the year, but we're all anticipating those moments where this tranquil, peaceful start of a new chapter can turn into a disagreement. So how do you have a disagreement, or how do you tell someone I don't agree, but in a way that can promote productive conversation?
最近我看到了一个心理医生就在分享啊，因为常常我们如果人跟人之间有一些 disagreement， 我们都会带一些情绪进来，那当然在职场上面也不例外。但是呢，通常因为有这些情绪，可能会让我们的 conversation 就没有办法非常的有价值。所以呢，他就教了一些方式，让我们能够回应或者是表达我们并不是很同意，但是同时呢，还是可以让这个 conversation 这个 dialogue 能够进行下去。
With our first sentence, we've all had that moment when we've been having an argument or a disagreement and we just want to throw our hands up and be like, you're crazy. There's nothing I can say to you. But that has never ended in a better conversation afterwards. So how would you flip this around?
She suggested that we could say, I can tell this is important to both of us, and we just see it differently.
Now, this may seem like stating the obvious. Like, yes, of course we see it differently. That's why we're having this argument. But in this case, it's about setting that baseline.
Yeah.
Be like, okay, look, you have your opinion. I have my opinion. We see this differently. How do we have a real discussion about this going forward?
Right. Or I also like this first part of the sentence where I can tell this is important for both of us, because a lot of times when we're having disagreement, it's about something we care about. It could be about family, relationship, or maybe the company. 所以如果我觉得我们就可以直接先讲说，这件事情对我们两个人来讲都很重要。So that's a commonality. Like you already pulled out the common thread of even in this kind of disagreeing situation.
The second example that is given is this idea of you just don't know the facts. You don't know what you're talking about.
You don't understand.
Right. Like you just don't know what's happening. And I would say that this conversation happens pretty often when two different sides have gotten two different pieces of information, and then they will just get into an argument and be like, well, you just don't know the truth.
So to flip this around, we can try this. We're talking in circle and clearly don't agree. Can you talk me through where you're coming from?
This is definitely a situation where you want to actually hear out what information the other person knows. If your job is just to shove your information down their throat, they're not going to hear it. They're not going to listen to you. You can turn it around, be the bigger person, and go, okay, you tell me what you know. And if there's any gaps, I can fill them in, or maybe there's information I don't have so that I can have a more productive conversation. Rather than if I shove my facts down your throat, you shove your facts down my throat, no one listens to anyone, that argument could last all day or all week.
Yeah. Now I have a question because we were talking about this earlier. There is a very classic American phrase used during this kind of situation is agree to disagree. Is it actually useful in these kind of emotionally charged situations?
I would say it's useful to end it, but it is not useful to resolve it. Now, the distinction between these two things is that when we say agree to disagree, I'm ending the conversation. I have not taken on your side.
Yeah.
I don't care what you think. I just don't want to have this conversation anymore. So I haven't resolved this situation, meaning it may come up again. We may get into the same argument. All I have done is ended it right now.
所以我觉得啊 agree to disagree 虽然我们常可能会听到很多尤其是美国人常会用的这个 phrase 但是我们觉得它并不是会带来一个价值的一个 phrase 因为通常你好像想要结束这个 conversation 或结束这个 argument 你才会讲那一句话讲完那句话好像两个人就是 okay walked away right and nothing happened 所以我们才会想说 okay 把那个先拿开先不建议大家用那个 phrase so that's why we kind of advocate not using that for this kind of situation.
The one place where this may come up is, let's say you're never going to see this person again. And this argument is really just a waste of both of your times.
Yeah.
This is not someone you're going to interact with a lot. They don't have any effect. Then you can agree to disagree, end the conversation, and walk away. But in the scenario where this is someone that it's your colleague, you have to go back to work the next day, it's your spouse or family member you have to see continually, then you can say this, but that does not mean the argument is resolved.
所以在这个情况我们今天做这个单元前提是对方跟你还是可以继续聊下去的 Like you guys can still communicate even though you had a disagreement 但是如果今天你是跟一个无法沟通的人你也不需要跟他沟通 then you can go ahead and say agree to disagree and end it right then and there.
Let's jump into the next one. We've all been in that situation where someone's venting, someone's had a bad day, maybe they're not expressing it in the best way, and there's always someone in that conversation who's like, well, here's what you should do. If I was in that situation, if I were you, this is what I would do. That rarely goes well when the person is just venting frustration or sharing emotion.
And I hear this a lot coming from someone who's older通常年纪比较大一点可能比较多生活的经验他们通常都会说诶如果我是你的话 If I were you, I would do this.
So rather than direct and give someone instructions on how to handle it, you can try this. I can see why you would think or feel that way.
So basically you're kind of standing on their side.
You're validating their feelings. And it's important to validate the feelings. That doesn't mean you have to validate the action. But in this case, you're validating the feelings. You can let them have the feelings and then talk through perhaps the logic. But if you jump straight into, well, here's the logic of how to solve your problem. If someone is still in the emotion, they're not going to hear you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. 在很情绪高涨的时候通常你叫人家该怎么做或者是你跟人家说诶你这样做比较好很少人会去听 So really just validating or actually empathizing with them on their feelings 通常是一个比较好的一个第一步骤做法
There's a great scene in a TV show that Sherry loves called Schitt's Creek. We've talked about it on the show before. But there's a great scene where one of the main characters has what he thinks is an argument with someone. And he goes back to his sister and he's complaining, oh, this person told me my business was going to be a failure. There's nothing I can do. And again, rather than judging and his sister being like, well, you should go do this, she just kind of asks questions, be like, oh, that's really frustrating. So what did he say to you? It's like, oh, that sounds like it would be hard to hear, but is that what he said? And she kind of talks him into this moment where he realizes like the other guy actually didn't insult him at all. It was just his own insecurities. But again, his sister didn't go in there and like attack or tell the brother he was wrong or tell the brother that the other side was wrong. She just kind of listened, validated his feelings, and then asked questions until he realized like, oh, maybe I'm being dramatic.
Like, wait, I think I'm the one that accused my business as a failure. Okay, so the last one. Now, we've all done this. In this like very emotionally charged situation and someone did something that you really did not agree to. You may say, you did this because...
Or you'll accuse someone of their actions or the motivation behind their actions. Like, oh, you just do that because your mother told you to do that. And then you're like, oh, okay, what?
Exactly. We're like, you did that because you're so pissed at me. You just did not like me. So again, it opened up the floodgate to more emotion.
In this instance, you can try, help me understand your thought process on this more clearly.
I like this. 我觉得这一句话 help me understand your thought process on this more clearly. 其实它可以通用在很多的不同的情况之下，尤其是像这样 disagreement. Again, 你是去请求他们在做更多的确认 clarification, like just trying to understand. 你没有在 point finger, 因为 you did this, 因为就很像你指着人家说你做这件事情怎么样怎么样。但是如果你只是想说 OK, help me to understand, 你是站在一个很 friendly 的一个立场，请对方来做一些 clarification.
As a word of advice on how to handle this is I wouldn't try to memorize all of these things or look for instances of where I can use all of them. Because when you're in an emotionally charged situation, especially like disagreement, it's hard to remember how to take the high ground, or it's hard to remember to be the emotionally stable one in that situation. So as a suggestion is I would look at just one of these phrases. Like, for example, the first one, I can tell this is important both to us. We just see it differently. And really internalize that and just focus on that to begin with, rather than look for phrases for very specific situations. Because in that heated moment, it's not so easy to be like, oh, I have a good phrase for this.
I'm going to pull up this handouts from Notion.
Right. So take a look at these, try to take just one in, and then think about, okay, the next time in a emotionally charged situation, what is the one kind of mantra I can come back to as a way to stabilize my emotion initially and perhaps the other side's emotion? We hope this helps and that the next time you're in a disagreement, you can find that one phrase to get back to so you can have a good conversation rather than a bad disagreement. We'll talk to you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
The Executive Plus podcast is a Presentality Group production, produced and hosted by Sherry Fang and Nick Howard. You can search us on Facebook, 主管英文 Executive Plus. You can also find us on Instagram, Communication R&D, and email us at sherry@epstyleplus.com.